New York.
Apple.
Hot dogs.
Dollar.
Hollywood.
Democracy.
Freedom.
Rock and roll.
Wall Street.
Statue of Liberty.
Los Angeles, California.
McDonald's.
Jeans.
Bubblegum. Video games. Nintendo.
What's so great about America?
Every Saturday night, 7 to 9 p.m., explore American culture and language.
With Master Steve,
Ina MK,
And Hasba Cutie.
tune in to find out about what makes America so great.
The Great American Weekend. Listen exclusively on Radio Von 103.1.
Also, watch us on the Radio Von Facebook page, website, and mobile app.
Oh, yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to the Great American Weekend here on Radio Von.
Welcome back to the studio, Master Steve.
Thank you, Ina.
How are you doing? How is everything going after all the eating and drinking and
It's going okay.
Maybe resting?
It's going okay.
During the holiday
I don't know.
season. Are you back on track or not yet?
I thought I was, but I'm feeling a little under the weather today, so we'll see how that goes.
I know how you feel. Same here. But
yeah, all the yucky viruses going around, people getting sick, and I avoided it over the holidays.
Away.
Yeah.
You hear us? This is an
gone.
official announcement from Right on Air. So, guys, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. We're back in the studio and all ready to share with you our usual
We've got a
segments.
calendar of events. I've got some slang. You've got your quotes, I see.
Of course.
We've got a guest.
Uh-huh.
And just
so we're ready.
The normal stuff. Back to the normal stuff.
Yeah.
Although I do have a question.
Back to black.
in the U.S., the Christmas season, we talked about this before. The Christmas season starts after Thanksgiving, right? And then it ends pretty much after New Year's. That's it. It's
and it
done.
ends with Thanksgiving.
And everything goes back to normal. Like 2 or 3 days after New Year's, everything's back to normal. And here, when does the holiday season start?
Not quite. From
we're
Soviet
still
times,
in the holiday season here, right?
Well, I have to say that at our house, the Christmas tree will stay till spring because my son just refuses to let it go.
You obviously have an artificial tree, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we do. And it's all covered with artificial snow, which flies all over the place.
Oh, I hate that stuff.
I
mean,
know.
it looks pretty, but it's not worth the trouble. It just gets everywhere and is messy.
Totally agree.
We have some right here, right?
Yeah,
right here
it's right
in
there.
front of us.
And
on our little Christmas tree in the studio here.
Master Steve, from Soviet times, we have this tradition which is left till nowadays, so-called Old New Year, because before the December 31st, it was January 12th night, 13th, or I always mix up these dates, or 13th night through the 14th.
Well, see, now I feel better about this because I was going to ask, when is the old New Year?
Every year
because there are always
debates.
parties like on the 12th and the 13th, and so I'm wondering, is the old New Year on the 13th and people celebrate like New Year's Eve, and or is it the 13th and or what? I don't know. Does it matter though? It probably doesn't matter. It's just another excuse to party.
Yeah.
And then,
so
things kind of go back to
this holiday
life as usual
stretches
afterwards.
all the way through. Like the closing of this season is on the 13th. Let's put it this way. And again, some people, like friends, get together and to celebrate and do the closing, and they're back on track at their works and stuff. Even though we've started our work on the 8th.
It's not the same here as it used to be.
Yeah.
When I first got here in 2001, everything was closed. You know, I mean, it was crazy. Now you even still for maybe even the last 10 years, you would have supermarkets open on New Year's Eve and Christmas Day. I mean, I remember when I first got here in 2001, if you hadn't done all of your like grocery shopping by New Year's, by the day before New Year's Eve, by the 30th, New Year's Eve and all the way through until
You'd
Christmas.
be starving.
Yeah. Like the stores were, I mean, one or two of the stores might be open, grocery stores, but a lot of it was all closed. But then, you know, people would buy lots of stuff. They would stock up. They would cook all their big, huge New Year's Eve feast and then have leftovers for like a week. And you'd go over to people's houses like every night of the week almost
and
between
everybody
New
had
Year's and Christmas.
lots of food.
Yeah, yeah.
And people
It's
would
just
get
if you
ready
ran out of something, you were out of it.
Yeah. And people would get ready for the holiday season like they were getting ready for World War III, you know. In case
Are
of
you
emergency.
moving into the bomb shelter in the basement, or are you just getting ready for the holidays?
In case of emergency break, all the 100 eggs that you have bought.
Well, eggs aren't as big of a deal for New Year's as they are for Easter.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
I remember the last few years at least, you've been able to get eggs the last couple of days before Easter. But I remember at one point, if you hadn't bought them by like the Wednesday before Easter, you were out of luck.
That was
You're
a
not
real
getting
egg
eggs.
hunt.
Yeah.
There you go.
If you hadn't bought them by Holy Wednesday, you were out of luck and you didn't have eggs for Easter. It was just crazy.
That's right. So this was a sum up for our holiday. And I was going to ask you what you did for Christmas, but we're going on a break now.
Oh, well, you can maybe ask me after the break if you're still interested. Or maybe I'll just tell you during the break and nobody else will get to hear it.
It's your choice. there is still freedom of choice in the studio. This is the Great American Weekend, ladies and gentlemen. We're here till 9 p.m. And, of course, we're going to welcome a guest, Armen Kazarian, tonight. Stay tuned. You can also call in 560-901 and join our conversation. We're all open and ready to hear what you have to say. Now, we'll be back after a short break. Stay tuned. This is Radio Van.
Come and hang with us every weekend. It'll be a blast.
A blast?
Yeah, a good time.
No, come chill with us. It'll be cool.
Chill?
Yeah, relax, hang out.
Come chew the fat with us.
Yuck! No way! Join us!
On the Great American Weekend, where we'll help you decode American slang.
Back in the studio with Master Steve, and I'm in MK, and we're here till 9 p.m. with our
the Great American
Weekend. And our theme tonight is higher education. So our quotes will be...
I would know nothing about that.
Yeah, right.
I know nothing about higher education.
You know nothing, Jon Snow. Our quotes are about studying abroad and higher education. So I'll start with a few quotes about studying abroad. Let's go. No one who has lived through the second half of the 20th century could possibly be blind to the enormous impact of exchange programs on the future of countries, says Bill Clinton. I was an exchange student, so maybe
I
I'll
believe
agree.
he was too. I think he was a Rhodes Scholar.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Wow.
I forget where he went. He may have just been to like England, but I believe Bill Clinton was a Rhodes Scholar.
So he knows what he's talking about. So we know that it's not enough for us to simply encourage more people to study abroad. We also need to make sure that they can actually afford it. Yeah. The benefits of studying abroad are almost endless. Michelle Obama.
Yeah, I would agree. Studying abroad is. I spent a semester it is costly. I was fortunate enough to be able to spend a semester in Italy when I was an undergraduate, and especially for Americans, because the typical American doesn't leave the U.S. in their lifetime, and that's changing more and more. But I mean, if you think about it, the U.S. is such a big country. I haven't been to all 50 states.
Yeah, you
I
can
probably
travel.
I probably haven't even been to half of the 50 states, unless you count like driving through on the way to another one. So the U.S. is such a big place to explore in and of itself that getting outside and getting abroad is not something that necessarily is.
And if you
all
go
that
to
common.
Vegas, you can go to Paris,
Yeah.
all kinds of countries and cities.
And going to Canada, I don't think really counts as going abroad. As somebody said in one of my high school social studies classes, I forget what it was. So when are we just going to make those Canada states?
Yeah.
As if they were territories and didn't have enough people in them to become states. So when are we just going to make Canada into states? Aren't there enough people living there? Like, well, okay.
Okay, we'll think about that. Why do you go away? So that you can come back, so that you can see the place you came from with new eyes and extra color, and the people there see you differently too. Coming back to where you started is not the same as never leaving. Terry Pratchett. And I agree.
Oh, definitely.
It's a great point. One of the most interesting and eye-opening parts of the study abroad experience is being able to view the United States from the lens of a different country. Madison Voss.
Mm-hmm. Which, that's...
Which
it's
you mentioned
invaluable.
before.
Yeah, it's invaluable.
Because not many people want to leave
to get
the
out
United States.
and more that's changing. I mean, a lot of people want to get out and see things.
Mm-hmm.
You see people, you hear people in the U.S. talk, well, I want to go and see the Louvre and the Eiffel Tower and St. Peter's Basilica and to see specific cultural and artistic things. Mm-hmm. And that's great. But also, I mean, to get, and this is difficult, to get abroad and to spend time there, as more than just a tourist, there's something much different about going and staying in one city for a week or a month than there is to go and do a European tour and hit, 10 cities in 14 days and see all of the big sites and then feel like you have been abroad.
Yeah.
You have, definitely. It's better to do that than to not do anything. But you never really quite get the feel of being in a different place, like culturally, if you just kind of hop through like that. And I understand it's expensive and it's time consuming and it's difficult for Americans to get over to Europe. I've been to Europe quite a few times, in part because it's so much closer.
Do you like it?
Oh, yeah. Rome is probably my favorite city in the world.
Haven't been there.
So it's
maybe
it's
my
incredible.
next destination.
I love it. It should be
in Europe.
It should be.
Okay, let's move to the next one. Do not follow where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Mm-hmm.
If you're 22, physically fit, hungry to learn and be better, I urge you to travel as far as wildly as possible. Sleep on floors if you have to. Find out how other people live and eat and cook. Learn from them wherever you go. Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah. And cook. Of course, that had to be in there, right?
Yeah,
Cook.
Of course. Proud to say that I met this guy, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Shortly right after his visit to Armenia, he passed away. Yeah. It was one of my best, really, really coolest experiences, sitting around same table with Anthony Bourdain and Serge Tankian.
That's really cool.
One's destination is never a place, but a new way of seeing things. Henry Miller. What we learn with pleasure, we never forget. Oh, that's for sure. Alfred Mercier. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Nelson Mandela. An investment in knowledge always pays the best interest. Benjamin Franklin.
Mm.
The things taught in schools and colleges are not an education, but the means to an education. American
yeah,
poet Ralph
yeah.
Emerson.
Ralph Waldo Emerson again, yeah.
The aim of the college for the individual student is to eliminate the need in his life for the college. The task is to help him become a self-educating man.
Oh, I think that's incredible. I love that quote. To teach you how to learn so that you can go out and teach yourself what you need to know. And I think so much of that has to do with, especially these days, and I think I've talked about this on the show before, just having a context and a basic understanding of things.
It's like getting the tools.
Yeah,
And
but not just the tools.
Learning to use them.
Not just that, though, but also just being aware of what's around. The questions I think I'll talk about this a little bit later, though. The taking classes that aren't related to what you are specifically studying and why that's important.
Aren't related to standard program, maybe.
Maybe, but anyway. Continue. In the next segment, I'll be talking about some of that stuff.
We can take a little break with a song followed, All for Love by Bryan Adams. And then we'll come back and share some more quotes.
Ooh, it's the Three Musketeers song.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Stay tuned. This is the Great American Weekend, and call in 560-901. Share with us what you think about the higher education.
Or your holidays, or anything.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, anything within reason. But call in.
Yeah, just call in. 560-901. We'll be back. Hey, Steve, do you like Chash Harisan spas?
Yeah, I love them. But what would you call them in English?
Yeah, I'd call them cowfoot stew, chicken porridge, and sour yogurt soup.
Sorry I asked.
The Great American Weekend.
Welcome back.
Makes me laugh every
Welcome back
time.
to the Great American Weekend here on Radio Vaughn, where we ruin your appetite for great Armenian food.
And I think it's a good thing after all this eating, Christmas and New Year eating, because I gained like 2 kilos.
Oh, wow.
And I officially announced about my New Year resolution that finally and eventually I'm going to... Oh well, forget. Never
That
mind.
song, it's so funny when you introduced the song before we went to break. I was like, oh yeah, I know that song, but you introduced it as a Bryan Adams song, right? And
well,
it
yeah,
is.
Rod Stewart,
and it's also Rod
Bryan-
Stewart and Sting.
Yeah,
and it's
true.
like, oh wow,
My bad,
that's why it
pardon
didn't
me.
quite ring a bell with me at first. I was, but yeah, oh man, 3 great. Yeah, that's a great song.
Performance.
Yeah.
Yeah, and would like to remind that later during the show, we are going to host Armen Kazarian in our studio. And he is a Fulbright scholar.
Mm-hmm.
And
He's actually a former student of mine.
yeah.
And
So
that's
it's all
how I
about
know
study.
him. Yeah.
You guys can call in 560-901, explore everything connected with English and America and studying.
American English. I'm not doing British
American
English.
and Armenian English.
I'm not doing so. If you ever hear someone refer to college or university as uni, yeah, that's British.
Oh.
I had never heard that before until I met British people. It's a British thing.
Okay, now we know.
Just,
Learn British
and I say that
English.
as if it's a British thing.
It's
I don't know. So, slang phrases, idioms, just general information about higher education in the U.S. So, professors are quite often called profs. Mm-hmm. We like to
each
shorten things.
language
Prof.
has this.
Yeah. Who's the prof in that?
abbreviation.
Who's the prof for that course? Mm-hmm. You taking it? Oh, yeah, who's the prof for that? We've got roommates. Yeah, it's a very, very common thing. In fact, I think it's essential to the American college experience to live in a dorm and to have roommates. So I did for my freshman year. I had it was a double room, so it was me and my roommate. My sophomore year,
Did you
I
have
had
a cool
roommate.
roommate?
Yeah. Yeah, I did.
Is it better to have a really cool roommate who you can chit chat with and share your, everyday stuff, or it's just disturbing you from studying?
I don't know. I mean, it's not good to have a roommate that you dislike. I mean, that's no fun. But I've had a little bit of each. A roommate who was like, oh yeah, nice guy, whatever. It's not like we sit around and chat with one another. We get along well enough. We're not really, really friends. Mm-hmm. And you just kind of go about your daily lives, and that's it. That works.
Yeah.
You can also be good friends.
Not bad.
With your roommate, and like you said, that can lead to a lot of distraction and trouble, distraction, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So living in the dorms in college. Yeah, the dormitories where they house the students, and I think that's still a pretty common thing in the U.S. to live in the dorms. And then a lot of people will move what they call off campus at some point and get an apartment with roommates. And so you do that kind of to save money. College and university in the U.S. is expensive. So, and I don't know how are the
scholarships are so
well,
good.
Scholarships, grants, loans, student loans, which are usually have, a little bit more flexible payback agreement or terms and lower interest rate student loans. But now here, is there a difference between colleges and universities here?
Yeah, slightly different. Like universities, more state, universities are considered more respected, or if I can put it this way.
Okay. Because in the U.S., there's a distinction. Uh-huh. Colleges are 2 or 4 year schools that give, in the case of a 2-year thing, they give an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree. Mm-hmm. They don't have any graduate programs, so they don't have classes, and they don't give degrees for master's degrees or PhDs. And those are colleges. Mm-hmm. So when you start after high school, you start studying, you're in college. Like the Columbia University, if you're an undergraduate student there, in New York, the school in New York, technically you're in Columbia College. Mm-hmm. And then there's the Columbia Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, which is part of Columbia University. And then, so those other things. There's a school of journalism.
It's kind of the same, but some colleges also have this, like the master's degrees, but mostly it's kind of the same here. Okay. So universities have this grading, and the colleges don't.
Okay. So if you're living in the dorms, you typically have what's called an RA, or a resident assistant. Uh-huh. And this is usually an older student
supervisor
who kind of supervises. Especially in the freshman dorms, the first year students. There's an older student there who's supposed to try to make sure that you're behaving.
Oh no,
not getting into trouble. So when we were talking about education, like high school education and studying abroad, I talked about, ditching class and there's another one that I didn't mention then. It's called playing hooky.
Hooky?
Yeah, hooky, which I have no idea where that comes from. I read a couple of different things online about it. I guess it might come from like Dutch or something. But playing hooky is cutting class, not going to class.
Yeah,
and
I kind of
a lot of times you end up, kids will be talking, university students, college students will be saying, well, okay, I'm going to take this class and I'm going to take it with this professor because they don't take attendance. So they don't care if you show up or not.
What if you get caught?
What do you mean get caught? I mean, well, and that's the thing. In most colleges in the U.S., it's really kind of up to the professor, my understanding, and it was when I was there. I don't know if it's changed. it's up to the professor as to whether or not they want to take attendance and whether or not they want to penalize you for not showing up to class.
Because maybe you come to the final exam and just
and that's
perform.
Yeah, I knew people that wouldn't go to some classes, and they would just show up for the exams and they would do fine. And it all depends, I think, on what kind of a class it was. Of course, me being in the humanities, philosophy, theology, political science, there was something to actually being there in class and being part of the discussions. I went to a smaller college, a smaller university, and so the class sizes were not that big. And, you would almost always have a chance to ask questions and converse with your classmates about the topics in the class and talk to the professor and whatever.
Yeah, it's always so cool to discuss and to have different opinions.
Yeah, I think
the material stays better in your brain.
Yeah. I think my biggest classes were my science classes, and they were a little bit more like the kind of lecture classes that you see in portrayed in the media, like a big room full of people that are just sitting there listening as the professor talks, and they don't ask questions and they just listen and take notes. That was not my college experience for the most part. But yeah, I had to take 2 science classes, and that's something that a liberal arts degree is what people usually get in the U.S. when they go to college and do a bachelor's degree. And that means that they take a mix of classes. And usually what it's called is the core curriculum. So you have to take, me being a philosophy major when I was an undergrad, I still had to take a math class. I still had to take 2 science classes. The people who were, I had a friend who was a physics major. He had to take, he had to take 1 philosophy class, 1 theology class, because it was a school that was run by Benedictine monks. So you had to take a theology class, and they had to take humanities classes, so a literature class and that kind of stuff. So the core curriculum makes sure that you get a well-rounded education, that you're not just studying one subject. And I think that is even more important now than it was in the past, because I think, being able to understand all of the information that's thrown at us in the information age, and to be able to analyze it, you need background, you need context. So yeah, you should have to take a literature class in college. Even if you're pre-med, you should have to take a philosophy class. You should have to take these things, not because it necessarily does anything
to do with your profession,
but it has something to do with you as a person, and you
as a
thinking person, as a person who's able to evaluate the information that comes at us from all directions these days, and have a better feel for, what fits with what I already know, and if it doesn't fit, why doesn't it fit? And maybe I should be skeptical of it. So yeah, the core curriculum now, I think, is even more important than ever. I even had to take a fine arts class.
I would dare to compare this with being a doctor, for instance, of, I don't know, a surgeon who has to know the whole body.
Well, yeah.
Not just if he does, for instance, an eye surgery, it's not only the eye that he has to know good. He has to know how the whole body works,
because all of these things are related to one another. They're all connected. In the universities in the U.S. and the colleges in the universities in the U.S., we have a lot of electives. Do they have that here? I know the program that I teach in right now doesn't really have much in terms of electives. There's the class, and you just take the certain sequence of classes, or there's the program, and you just take the certain sequence of classes, and that's it. There's really no choice.
Electives, you mean you can choose the stuff that...
You can choose what
I
classes you
think there
take.
is a little, like you can choose languages or something. There is not big of a choice at the...
Okay.
But
I think in a lot of U.S. universities, there's a lot of choice. You know,
I know, and I like
certain,
it because you can take like other activities and like drama and other stuff, which is not really related to what you
I
actually...
took it. I had to take a fine arts class. I started a painting class and I dropped it because I was horrible.
but it's really cool that you can give it a try.
Yeah, and then
important.
I ended up taking an acting class for my fine arts credit because I had to. You know, and you have, you have to take a philosophy class at a lot of schools. You can a lot of times choose between several, you know, and that I think is interesting. I think that's nice. The more kind of specific your program is, like pre-med, they usually don't have a whole lot of choice. Nursing, I know nursing was a big program where I did my undergraduate degree, and they didn't have a whole lot of choices. Because they had, in order to graduate in 4 years, there were certain things that they absolutely had to do. And because of this thing with prerequisites, their schedule was pretty set. Now, a prerequisite is a class that you have to take in order to be able to take another class. So, you know, you would have to take, say, you know, calculus 1 before you could take calculus 2.
And actually,
right?
this is one of the things that the choice. I mean, what we were talking before, it was one of the things that I really loved about the high school in the U.S. because we besides the obligated subjects, we also had things that we could choose from, like the Spanish language, I don't know, the cheerleading. And
Cheerleading was a class?
And like singing and the choir and all these extra
now here
options that you could choose. It
do
was
you
cool.
have minors in college here?
Minors?
Yeah. Like, I mean, you get here, my understanding is you study like in the faculty of something and you get your degree with an emphasis in that.
And you can choose a second.
You can choose a second
profession.
All right. In the U.S.,
And it's easier if you have already gone through the first. It's kind of easier if you're applying to the same university, especially there.
Oh, okay. See, in the U.S., you go to, and there's this myth about you apply to certain schools because you know what you want to do, and that school is supposed to be good at what you want to do, and so you go there for that. But a lot of times you end up changing your mind. I mean, I really didn't know what I wanted to do.
You end up changing your mind and choosing even jobs. So that's pretty normal.
So, you know, a lot of time by the middle of your second year of college, you usually have to declare a major, and your major is the specialty.
Yeah.
And you can sometimes do a double major if you have enough time and if the classes and the electives all fit together. And then you can have a minor, which a minor then is kind of a secondary emphasis. So you take a lot of classes in that area, but not enough to have it be your specialty. My bachelor's degree, like I said before, was in philosophy. That was the major. And then I had minors in theology and political science. I started university with...
Major and minor, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I started university thinking maybe I would become a lawyer. And that's what that's what brought me into philosophy and political science, because they didn't have pre-law at the college I was going to, and then I went and spent a semester studying in Rome and came back and I said, law? Yeah, right. I like this philosophy stuff too much. And I loved all the art and stuff in Rome. And then I still haven't figured out what the hell I'm going to do with my life. I graduated with a philosophy major and I still don't know what I'm going to do with my life.
You're a great philosopher. Well, Master Steve, I've prepared a quiz for you.
Oh, you have?
And if you
Okay.
want to do it now, then we can do it now.
Well, we've got 5 minutes. Why don't we do it in the next segment?
No, we can, but it's a short one, though.
Will it fit in the next 5 minutes? Yeah, okay, then let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. I'm ready, go. So this is a quiz to identify what type of a student you are. What's your ideal study environment? In a quiet library, at home, in a group, or outdoors?
Definitely not outdoors this time of year.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't usually do well studying in groups. What were the other? At home?
At home or in a quiet library?
Probably in a quiet library. Or in a cafe. I mean, I would sit and study in cafes a lot of times too.
Then library is kind of like a cafe as well.
Yeah, well, it's not that quiet.
Yeah.
And sometimes that helps.
Cafe.
Sometimes that helps.
You're at a house party. What are you doing? Having political debates in the kitchen? Dancing the night away in the lounge?
I'm not sure you need to go any further. But,
I know. Playing sports in the backyard? Curiously watching everyone else from the corner. I think A.
Either the first one or the last one, probably the first one.
I think the first one. What's your ideal weekend activity? Going on a weekend trip to an exotic destination? Organizing an on-campus blood drive? Hanging out with friends and grabbing a drink? Getting a head start on your next assignment?
What was the first one?
Going on a weekend trip to an exotic destination.
No, I'd say, what was it? The
Hanging
third
out with
one.
friends.
Third one, yeah. Hanging out with friends, yeah.
You're stranded on a desert island with a group of strangers. What are you doing? Keeping a diary and making notes on your discoveries? Organizing the building of the raft and the gathering of supplies for survival? Exploring the jungle? This place is awesome. And the last one, making friends and trying to keep spirits high. I'd do the last one. I think you'll do the organizing the building of the raft and the gathering of supplies for survival.
I might, unless somebody else decided to do it, and then I'd just go get lost in the jungle.
This place is awesome.
Dude, this is such a cool jungle. I think I'm going to die here, but that's okay, because this is cool.
That's so positive. I choose number 2 for you, Master Steve.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. What job would you most want? The CEO of a big international company, an academic at a top research university, a bartender at the hottest club in town, and the last one, a world-famous travel blogger.
Probably the second one. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't mind being a bartender at like a pub. But
that wouldn't
a club,
make long...
a club would just be too noisy, and I probably wouldn't like the music.
A month. If we're talking about 1 month period, then that's okay. What style of class presentation would you give? Confident and authoritative?
Authoritative.
Yeah, right. That one. Detailed and analytical. Entertaining with some jokes. I'll choose this one. Lots of inspiring images and video content.
I don't like video content in class.
I think detailed and analytical.
Yeah, maybe.
Which Disney character do you most relate to? Aladdin, Belle, Mufasa, Hercules.
Robin Hood.
know.
Robin Hood. The fox. I don't. Mufasa? No.
Yeah.
I mean,
Why not?
Wait, what was the first one? Aladdin?
Yeah.
Aladdin. Why
Okay.
not?
At least you travel a lot. What's your most used app? Instagram, Messenger, calendar, web browser.
Web browser.
And number 9 question, where do you most want to travel to? Ibiza, Spain, London, England, Bali, Indonesia, New York, USA.
Oh, London. I still have never been to
I
London.
love it.
I've never been.
I think you'd love it. And the last question, what's your main reason for wanting to study abroad? Getting a good career, learning and personal development, making lifelong friends, experiencing a new culture and a way of life.
The last one.
Ta-da!
That's it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, we'll be back after this break with the answer.
We'll be back after the break.
So this is
with
the Great American
answer.
Weekend here on Radio Vaughn. We are here until 9 o'clock tonight. We will be back with the results of the quiz after this commercial break.
Let's see what kind of a student will Steve be next time.
We'll be back.
Yep.
Hello?
Hi, is your refrigerator running?
No, it doesn't have any legs.
Some American jokes just don't work with foreigners.
And we're back at our studio with our show, The Great American Weekend. And
I am Master Steve, and she is Ina MK, and I am anxiously awaiting. I'm anxiously awaiting the results of the quiz.
You are the scholar.
I am the scholar.
Scholars often get labeled as bookish, but we are not. You are not. Sure, you might enjoy a day spent with your nose in a book, but that's not the only...
Just a day?
But that's not the only thing you like. Scholars thrive in environments that stretch them intellectually, whether that's through new adventures, new experiences, or a new study finding. If you're a scholar, you may be interested in pursuing the following types of career: entrepreneurship, international studies, psychology, environmental science, computer science and IT, and philosophy.
Me. Of course.
Oh, there you go.
Wait, that was a career? You might be interested in these career paths? Philosophy is not a career path.
You might want to become a philosopher. These were the results.
Philosophy is dead.
No, it's not. There's this saying, unhappy people become philosophers.
Well, the bigger question is, though, does it help? I'm unhappy. I'm going to become a philosopher. Does it help or does it make it worse?
Sometimes it does help, I think, to look at things differently. So now, are we ready to share some news with our listeners before we welcome our guest in the studio?
Yeah, Armen is here. He's outside. We were just chatting with him during the song. But current events, we haven't done current events for a while, have we? I don't remember. I mean, I think the last time I was here and we were doing current events, we were talking about the fact that the House of Representatives in the U.S. was about to vote on 2 articles of impeachment. They voted and passed those. And since then, absolutely nothing has happened.
Are you sure?
Flew back. I mean, well, not on that front. Oh my gosh, this is becoming even more of a farce and a mess than it was before. I can't believe how ridiculous some of this has gotten. So Nancy Pelosi, who's the Speaker of the House, she's a Democrat and she's the leader of the House of Representatives. She now has the articles of impeachment that have been passed by the House, and they are supposed to be sent over to the Senate, the other branch of the legislature in the U.S., and they are supposed to organize a trial. So President Trump has been impeached, and the trial takes place in order to decide whether he is guilty and should be removed from office, in which case Mike Pence, the vice president, would become president. Well, Nancy Pelosi is not sending those articles of impeachment over to the Senate, so they can't start the trial. And the reason that she's not doing that is because she wants to influence the way that the trial is organized. There is nothing in the Constitution itself that talks about how the trial is supposed to take place. Aside from the Senate acts as the jury, there are lawyers that present the cases, and that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is the judge, presides over the trial. So whether they're going to have witnesses or not, what's going to be allowed in as evidence, how long it will take, all of these things are open. And the Republicans...
That's funny.
Well, I don't know. The Republicans have control of the Senate. They have the majority in the Senate. And so they are the ones who can vote and decide on all of these things. Well, Nancy Pelosi is trying to influence what they decide by withholding the articles of impeachment until they set up a trial procedure that she's happy with. Well, the Republicans are basically just sitting there saying, well, that's fine. We don't want to have this trial anyway because we're the majority here. We're probably going to acquit him and not throw him out of office. So go ahead. Hold on to the articles of impeachment. We don't care. It just makes you look like more of an idiot because you passed them saying that it was urgent that we remove Trump from office so that he doesn't do any more stupid stuff that endanger the country. And now you're sitting on the articles of impeachment and not allowing a trial. The whole thing is just a farce. I mean, I can see both sides. I can see why Pelosi's doing what she's doing. And I can see why the Republicans in the Senate are doing what they're doing. It's just
basically doing
like a
nothing.
bunch of... Yeah. It's like a bunch of kids. I think it's ridiculous. But I thought it was so funny because I went back to Minneapolis to be with my parents and the rest of some family during the holidays. And we landed in Moscow for a layover on our way there. And we get into the airport, my Wi-Fi connects, and I open up my web browser, and there it is on BBC, the news. Trump's impeached. And I just thought, what an incredibly fitting place for me to be when I get this news. Moscow. I think my Facebook status was, it's dark here, and if I look towards the Kremlin, I can see the glow of Putin's smile. I think it's so ridiculous that so many people think that Trump is like Putin's, that Putin has something on Trump, and Trump is just doing what Putin wants him to do. No, I think that's ridiculous. Trump does what he wants to do, for better or for worse. He's a loose cannon. And I think Putin just loves this because the Americans are tearing themselves apart and making all sorts of divisions and controversy.
He's just watching
on their own, and he just has to sit back and watch and look. They're weakening themselves as a nation, as a government, as a world power by bickering and fighting with one another, and he really doesn't have to do much. I think Putin is absolutely
and rule.
Yeah. He doesn't even want to conquer. He doesn't even want to rule over. Who would want to rule over the United States?
Master Steve.
No, I mean, that would be a responsibility.
Yeah,
that would be a responsibility. Putin just wants Americans to tear after one another so that it's a weaker country so that he can get away with doing whatever he wants. And he's achieving that. And American politicians, American media, even to a certain extent, the population, they're just feeding into that. And it was funny when I was in the U.S. for 2 weeks, and people were barely, at least the people that I was around, were barely talking about it. We're barely talking about impeachment.
You think that people are not interested?
I think a lot of people are just fed up.
Tired
of it. I know I am, but that's why I keep on talking about it on the radio, right? I just keep on talking about it because I'm sick and tired of it. Oh boy, there's nobody watching the show anymore. Nobody's listening.
You know that hope dies last.
So do you have some? Yeah. Do you have some local news, and then we'll talk about what's been happening with the U.S. and Iran.
I've got some cultural news to just light up our Well, actually, the news
Lighten up. Our
lighten up, and it's not a good thing because it's about the Australian fires. So it's not a good thing to talk about lighting up. But oh well, Australian.
We are depressed, and this is depressing. We should just all become philosophers.
Yeah, this is what's happening. Australian fires painted on body of an Armenian painter. The devastating wildfires in Australia have not left the art people indifferent. Painter Aza Pashinyan has depicted the enormous scale of the bushfire, the burning forests, and escaping animals on her entire body. This painting was different in terms of its emotional appeal, she says. As the painter noted, she hadn't noticed how quickly time went by and how many hours it took to create this painting. I was working intensively, and during the process I had the feeling that my whole body was burning as well. In her words, the disaster that took human lives and killed so many animals was impossible to describe through words. So that's how she decided to put these emotions in life. I usually paint visual illusions that do not exist in reality. This work, unfortunately, is the reflection of the very reality, she says. To note, Australia is fighting an unprecedented bushfire season filled by record temperatures and widespread drought. Millions of acres have been touched and entire homes have been swallowed by flames. More than 20 people have lost their lives. Animals have been killed. Not a very happy news.
Now, I have a question about this.
Yeah.
Is she painting this on herself?
Yeah.
So
I've seen the picture in the article, so she painted her whole body.
She painted it.
Yeah.
That's talent.
Mm-hmm.
Like with a mirror
really
and
cool.
Okay, because all I've seen is there's a because when you were talking about this the other day and saying you were going to talk about this on the show, I looked it up a little bit briefly, and I just saw, I think it was on Instagram, a picture, and it was just her from like the shoulders up. Mm-hmm. But you're saying it's like her entire body is painted, and she painted it herself? Or
I'm afraid to be mistaken because I haven't seen the whole body.
Right.
But the picture, that's the same picture I saw online.
Yeah.
So,
and it's like, she must be using a mirror or something, which is that's talent.
It's
look
tough.
in the mirror and paint. I can't paint anything. I can barely draw stick people.
and you know, actually, there is.
They always end up like crooked and
game.
wiggly. They're not stick people. They're like spaghetti. They're like cooked spaghetti people.
Okay, we are about. Actually, it's the time is up, and we're ready to.
Time is up. It's
Hello?
done. We're over.
Is your refrigerator running?
We gotta. We're gonna have our guest come in after this short break, and he's going to rescue us and you
from a disaster.
Rescue us from ourselves and rescue you from us. Armen, get ready.
We're ready.
You have your work cut out for you.
We'll be back after this short break. Stay tuned till 9 p.m. with the Great American Weekend with Master Steve, and I'm Ina MK.
Ina MK.
Ina, what would make America great again?
More barbecue.
No, we need more freedom. That's what'll make it great.
Join us on Great American Weekend.
And help us solve all of America's problems.
Every show is recorded by the NSA and sent to the White House.
Welcome back to the Great American Weekend here on Radio Vaughn. I am Master Steve. She is Ina MK, and we are here. Are you going to interrupt me and then not introduce him?
Come on, go for it. After all this
Armen
spaghetti
Kazarian.
Hello, thank you for
welcome
having me.
to the program.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Great American Weekend. How do you feel? Is it comfortable
Feeling
on the
very
red
comfortable.
couch?
It's a comfortable couch.
Great. So our very first question for you. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great.
After all the Christmas and New Year's breaks, did you spend it here in Armenia?
I did. It was the first time in 5 years that I was back in Armenia. I celebrated the past 5 New Years in the US.
Oh, wow.
I never returned back to Armenia for winter.
Did you miss it here?
I did a lot, especially all the food and 10, 13 days of celebrations. that was great. Yeah, and visiting, friends, family, having them over, all that. So yeah, I definitely missed it.
So, well, what did you miss the most about Armenian holidays?
Food.
Yeah.
Okay, food. Yeah,
food.
What? But what? What food?
Oh, what particularly?
Yeah.
Oh man, that's a tough question. I mean, there's so many good options. Like
Belinchiks.
probably the least favorite of mine, but I think I'll go with ishli kufta.
Oh,
Nice.
Yeah, I missed it a lot because I can make the other things like dolma and salads and stuff, but ishli kufta I was
that
never
takes
able
a
to
lot
make
of
that.
effort.
Yeah.
It's hard to make ishli kufta. I know that.
So, how did you spend the last 5 holidays then in the U.S.? What was your typical American holidays, and maybe what was your favorite? What was your least favorite?
So I try to travel, I think, every year. So the first year I was in New York and Pennsylvania, so the East Coast. And then I think another year I was in Texas. And then another year I was in Mexico celebrating Christmas with a local family. I was hosted by a local family, and we spent it, the traditional way. So it was amazing. And then I think last year I was in Colorado. Maybe last 2 years I was in Colorado just because I was studying for qualifying exams and all that. So I couldn't really travel. Okay. But yeah. Last year I went to California. Never mind. Okay.
You didn't like it in California.
I like San Francisco. I do love San Francisco.
Oh, San Francisco is a great city.
Not so much.
So what do you do in America?
Mm-hmm. So I went there as a Fulbright scholar to do my master's in agricultural and applied economics. Mm-hmm. And then right after that, I started my internship at the U.S. Department of Agriculture with another scholarship, which is called the Edmund S. Muskie.
So Muskie scholarship.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then I started my PhD, again in agricultural economics at Colorado State University. I didn't continue that at the University of Missouri, so I went to Colorado State University, and that's what I've been doing.
Cool.
Yeah.
How does a PhD in the U.S. work?
So I think a major difference between Armenian, or broadly speaking, the European structure of PhD programs and the U.S. PhD program is that in the U.S. you have to take classes, and usually pursuing a PhD degree takes longer time than it does in Europe, including Armenia and post-Soviet countries. So over here or in Europe, it's usually 3 years, and you just start with your research right after you join the program. You might take classes, or you might be required to take a few classes, but in the U.S. it's a structured program. So the first 2 years, 2.5 years, you have a certain number of classes that you have to take, or certain number of credits that you have to take. Mm-hmm. Some of them are required courses. Others are, you're still supposed to take those credits, but you can choose the classes, which is amazing because it gives you so much flexibility.
I agree.
And I was listening to you guys speaking about,
electives and stuff. Yeah.
What do you think our educational system lacks?
I think
versus
in other words, why are you in the U.S. and not here?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think. So I studied at the Agribusiness Teaching Center, which is a American-style program in Armenia at the Armenian National Agrarian University. This is where I know Stephen from. Mm-hmm. He used to teach me, and so that is very similar to the American programs, right? Mm-hmm. To the American bachelor's program, and it really equipped me with knowledge and skills to be successful at the master's level. So before going there, people would be like, you're going to be studying the whole time. You won't have time for breaks. You won't have time for traveling because you're doing a master's. And I was like, wow, that must be really tough. However, that was not my experience. because really ATC prepared me for that. I mean, the workload at ATC is very similar to that in the US, you know. So another, thing about your question is that I think it would be great for Armenian PhD programs to bring that component of required courses, because you do learn a lot of tools and skills during your master's and bachelor's, but it's not enough to perform high quality research at a PhD level. Yes, you will learn things on your own while conducting research, but having those classes, research method classes or field specific classes, does help in conducting actual research.
Okay, thank you for your answer, and we're ready for a break. We will interrupt you for a few minutes. We are going to listen to Bad Woman Blues by Beth Hart right after the advertisement, and we'll be back in our studio with our guest, Armen Kazarian. Stay tuned. Also, you can call in 560-901, ask your questions, and write your comments in our live video.
What's the best word in American English?
My all-time favorite word is but I usually refer to it as lovemaking.
Become more fluent in American English and slang.
Welcome back to the Great American Weekend here on Radio Vaughan.
And we have our guest here in our studio, and of course, lots of questions for him. So, Armen Can, can you tell us, name 5 things you love about Armenia?
History, culture, nature, and then friendliness of people, or does it go under the culture category?
Hospitality.
No, maybe hospitality.
Yeah, hospitality.
Let's go as a separate option. And then 5th, okay, this is going to be a longer answer for the 5th one. It's the fact that whatever work you do here in Armenia, the impact is so much bigger, and it's actually more satisfying than doing the same job, let's say, in a developed country like the US. So,
Why do you think is that?
I mean, there are multiple reasons, right? First, the size of the country is small, so there are limited number of professionals in every field, and even if all of them are great, like every individual's work is so much needed to develop the country. The US is already developed, and even if you have, even if I'm not doing my job as an agricultural economist, there are like so many other agricultural economists that can do the same job.
The competition is...
Yeah, the competition is there,
smaller.
but also the impact is, I guess, smaller. While doing the same kind of research in Armenia makes it feel so much better, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, then how would you contrast those things that you like about Armenia with America, and what you like or dislike about America?
So I'm going to kind of go back to the previous question and relate to that. When I said nature and history of Armenia, right? So we grew up listening about it and reading books and being taught about it in history classes, but I never really appreciated it until I moved to the US, honestly.
Because America doesn't have history.
Not...
And... well, in comparison,
yeah.
I mean, Armenian history is like this, and
Right.
American history is like this.
Right. So I never really appreciated even the older churches and monasteries and stuff until I moved there. Part of the reason is that. But then again, I traveled to, several countries, and I've seen historical places in Europe. And it's just so unique in Armenia. Even the churches, you can see churches anywhere, right? All over Europe, Africa, all over the place. And ours is just so unique. Nature, I traveled a lot in the US, and I really admire the American nature, like the national parks. And then I realized that we're not really advertising our national parks or, just nature in general enough. So we probably should be working on that.
So as a transition to what you just said, what do you think about this quote? You will never be completely at home again because part of your heart always will be elsewhere. That is the price you pay for the richness of loving and knowing people in more than one place. Miriam Adney.
I totally agree with that. And I think it's wonderful that we have that opportunity to actually visit different places and learn about other cultures and leave a piece of our heart or our being in, other
Somewhere
countries.
else.
Yes, it makes it also challenging to live in one place because you have to limit. You're like, oh, now I miss Ethiopian cuisine or I miss Thai cuisine or whatever that is not in Armenia, right? And then you move to the US or friends. And then you move to the US and like, yes, but now I miss part of the other things that I had in Armenia or in, Hungary where I lived for a bit. And then, so it makes living a little bit more challenging, but I think it's a wonderful, it's a worthy price to pay for, all this experience.
Great. Thank you.
I've got one.
Yeah.
So
Go for it.
Agricultural economics. What is that, and what are you doing in terms of research?
So, broadly speaking, it's applied economics. So it's applied on agriculture, and usually agricultural economics departments are either titled agricultural economics or agricultural and applied economics or agricultural and resource economics. So depending on the focus of the department. I study agricultural economics, which means using data to inform policymakers about agricultural policies. It can also mean more specifically, you can also think about estimating demand and understanding what components affect consumers' demand of certain products. Like I have worked on ready-to-eat cereal. Right now I'm working on the milk industry or farmers markets. What can farmers do to attract more customers at the farmers markets? So, but that's specifically talking about my research, right? More broadly speaking, I guess it's just applying data and applied analysis to policy relevant questions. Yeah.
How can we compare consumers in the United States and consumers in Armenia?
So I am working right now on the dairy and milk alternative industry, which is soy milk, almond milk,
which is not really popular here in Armenia. Yeah.
Now it's a big thing in the US and it's growing really fast while the regular milk or dairy milk demand is going down.
All the diets and
people think that these are the same product. They're interchangeable. There's actually a funny study or funny result of a study that says many Americans think that chocolate milk comes from brown cows. It's an actual study, like it's an actual survey. It's not a made-up story. Now, I don't know whether people responding were serious about the question or they just made fun of it, but I think
I'm hoping they made fun of it. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware of it. You're probably not, but there was an advertising campaign for, at least in the Midwest. I think Kemp's is a dairy company. And they sell ice cream, I think, throughout the United States, but definitely in the Midwest. And they had an advertising campaign in the 90s, and it was basically that. The chocolate milk came from chocolate cows. The chocolate ice cream came from brown cows, the chocolate cows. So you had the, what was it? I forget what it's called. The ice cream that's the green peppermint with the chunks of chocolate in it. Whatever it was. And so they had a cow that was green and black, and that's where that ice cream came from. And so there's a history to that question and that idea. And so I'm hoping that people were answering that question were like my age and remembered those commercials, because they were funny commercials. They were great commercials. And we're just saying, oh yeah, it comes from brown cows.
Yeah. I hope it's a joke too. But yeah, going back to the question, I think U.S. consumers are more sophisticated.
They're more sophisticated.
I think so.
But they think that chocolate milk comes from brown cows.
Yeah. Sophisticated in the sense that they have a demand for a whole variety of products. Like in Armenia, we do have almond milk, I believe, and soy milk.
Yeah.
But I think that's about it.
How do you milk an almond? I mean, you've got to have really strong fingers.
It's really hard to find real coconut milk here.
Yeah.
Because when we were doing this keto diet thing, we really needed coconut milk to make like different desserts, and we couldn't find any.
Oh.
Yeah.
So, Armen, what is the perfect weekend for you? You know, our show is called The Great American Weekend, so you have to answer this question.
I'm going to go with two answers, depending on my mood. First, I do love hanging out with my friends and, you know, going to a bar, a pub, a club, whatever that might be, depending on the city, because clubs in some cities are not that great, especially if it's a college town. Clubs in bigger cities,
loud and obnoxious.
I love them. But then at other times, I love just staying in and reading books, watching movies, binge watching Friends or other shows. Yeah.
What is the last book you've read that you really loved?
The last book that I read, I'm actually gonna look at my phone because I'm terrible at
go ahead, take your time.
I'm terrible at remembering names of authors or books, but I do.
Just Google.
No, I'm not gonna Google it. It's an app that keeps track of all the books that I read.
Oh, which app do you use?
It's Goodreads.
Goodreads? Okay.
Goodreads, yeah. So it's called Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah, I've heard about this book.
Yeah.
It's a marketing book, right?
Well, not really marketing, as it talks about financial education. That even in the U.S., many people don't have enough financial education, and they make wrong decisions throughout their lives, hoping that by the time they retire, they'll be well off. And in fact, now we see the economy has changed a lot, and the old traditional methods are not applicable anymore. So people need to keep educating themselves about finances in general. And this is a book that two of my friends recommended me on New Year, because I posted something on Facebook that, I need recommendations for 2020, and two of the people recommended this. So I'm like, okay, I'll go with it. Yeah.
And
here's what was the last book that you read that you hated?
Did you read
probably something for class, right?
No.
Did you have to read it?
The good thing about doing a PhD is that you're doing it not because you have to, it's because you enjoy it. So all the books, I've pretty much enjoyed them. Okay. And I don't think I've read a book that I hated. I try to take at least one lesson from each of them, even if it's a negligible lesson or like a small or very obvious lesson.
Lesson of, I'm glad I read that book so that I don't read anything by that author ever again.
Exactly.
If you could choose anyone, living or dead, who would you choose to be your teacher?
Oh, wow. let's I really admired the works of, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Dan Ariely. He is a behavioral economist. And he's alive. So I'm hoping that one day I might attend one of his seminars. But then also Kahneman, he was a psychologist who did a lot of work in behavioral economics, and name of his co-author, Tversky, I believe. Yeah. So again, a behavioral economist, which I think there's so much place for behavioral economics nowadays in policymaking, and I'm glad there's some programs like that in Armenia right now.
And what is the best education method for this new generation? What do you think in this age of internet and all these technologies?
I think leaving some space for creativity is important. Like, I was teaching macroeconomics this semester or past semester, and
is there a space for
that's what I'm saying. There isn't much space for creativity in macroeconomics because it's usually definitions and facts, but I try to bring in statistics from different countries to compare and see why the differences, or why there are these differences across, let's say, Armenia and Georgia or Armenia and Azerbaijan. And I also ask for possible policy solutions or policies from students to see what they can come up with for unemployment or for whatever other problem there might be, right? So I think having some space for creativity is important, but also incorporating technology and, all possible sorts of social media, maybe even Instagram, Facebook. We need to incorporate as many of those tools as possible because
to make it interesting.
And students are going to be on their phones regardless, so you might use it in your advantage. I mean, the advantage of the class and hopefully the students as well.
I'm waiting to have a little box that I can carry into the classroom with me and put it down on the table and turn it on, and it just jams all cell phone signals. And just, okay, you guys are done. Put your phones away.
You can just ask everyone to put their cell phones into the box.
Yeah, and I've tried that, and then without fail, somebody doesn't turn the ringer off, and all of a sudden you're sitting there in the middle of class, and the box is ringing, and you're like,
and you don't know which
whose
one
phone
to
is
turn.
that? Whose phone is it? And they might be too ashamed to, or might not even realize that it's theirs, and then it just keeps ringing. And
another thing is that they might have two phones.
I can imagine his face.
They might have two phones.
Yeah, they usually just give one and then keep the other one and then play on the other one. So.
There's always a plan B.
Yeah.
And what is your greatest strength and greatest weakness?
Am I at a job interview?
Yes.
Radio Vaughn is looking for an agricultural economist.
We're really interested in chocolate cows at the moment.
Greatest strength, I would say, is ability to listen to people and also being a hardworking person. Greatest weakness, I would say probably dedicating too much time to work at the expense of, life, other aspects of life.
So where is this creative side that you were mentioning, that you were talking about before? Do you have a creative side, and what do you do?
I hope so. I mean, doing research, coming up with gaps in literature that no one else has covered, and filling in that gap with appropriate research methods, or coming up with your methods I think, requires a lot of creativity. Because you need to find a question that no one else has asked. And nowadays there are many people who ask questions and do research, so it's really hard. But then...
singing?
I'm not a good singer. I have... I can reproduce music very easily, so I have good hearing. What would be the right term for it?
Well, you have a good ear.
Good ear. My voice is not good for singing. I do sketching, which I started recently, like last year or the year before.
There you go.
So, yeah.
What is the most unusual fear that you have?
Unusual? I'm not sure if it's unusual. I think it's pretty common, but it's the fear of spiders. And it's not really a fear. It's just I'm disgusted by spiders.
Arachnophobia.
Yeah. So, my roommate and I laughed about this a lot because he is a botanist and biologist, and he loves animals and plants, and he protects them. And I'm like, no, if I see a spider, I'm gonna just smash it. Like, there's no way the spider is gonna survive.
There's
especially
no
if it's
other
in my
option.
Room. No. So yeah, it's not a fear, but just I don't know. I'm disgusted by them.
Yeah, they are kind of creepy. They are creepy little things.
Cockroaches.
They're creepy when they're little, and they're just really disgusting when they're big.
Yeah, exactly.
What is the biggest lesson life has taught you?
I think the lesson that we shouldn't have much place for stereotypes. I think I did, and I know many people do, have different stereotypes about different people. And that is a very, very limiting factor, because when you have a stereotype, a bad stereotype especially, you kind of, limit yourself with the number of people that you can become friends with or interact. And that also limits your potential for growth. when you don't have stereotypes, or even if you do have stereotypes, but you try to, fight those stereotypes, fight those stereotypes, I think you become a better person, and then you realize a lot of times that those stereotypes are just stereotypes, nothing more. They don't really represent. You can't really describe entire groups of people with one word or two stereotypes. We're all like humans, and we have our advantages and disadvantages and strengths and weaknesses, and I think the diversity is very beautiful, which is something I really admire in the US, that people in the US do value the diversity in everything.
Yeah, there's no other choice, I think.
The other choice is to, I guess, hate on people, and
because people in the US are so diverse.
Oh yeah, well, not every state though, and not every city.
Well, yeah, from place to place, it's different. Yeah, definitely. What are the biggest differences that you've seen, and not necessarily about diversity, but between Colorado and Missouri?
Oh, so people are, I think, much more open-minded in Colorado, at least in college towns like Fort Collins, Boulder, Denver, or the bigger cities like Denver. In Missouri, my impression was that many people, especially older generation, were more conservative. And then also the weather and the environment in Missouri is just terrible. It's very 100% humidity almost every day. Then in the winter, it's super strong winds along with snow and, I don't know, minus 20 Celsius. So not a good combination of...
It gets that cold in Missouri in the winter?
Yeah, it does get cold, and it's windy, and it's humid, and it's snowy, so yeah.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
In Colorado, in contrast, it's just like Armenia. The nature, I mean, so many mountains.
Yeah, it's mountains.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose that kind of answers my next question. Which out of the two places did you feel more at home?
So the obvious answer would be LA, because it's just like Armenia, and it's,
too
full
many
of Armenians.
Armenians
Too many
there.
Armenians, probably more Armenians than there are in Armenia. And not in a good way. Like, I felt home not in a good way in LA.
Home back in the 90s.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's a perfect definition. Of,
like a bad nostalgic, nostalgic in a negative way.
I hope we don't have any listeners in LA. You've just offended them all.
No, well, not all of them.
Not all of them.
I've got a cousin living there and 2 cousins.
No, I mean,
and many friends.
It's a great community. Just, not where I felt comfortable, I would say. Doesn't mean it's bad. It's just not where I felt comfortable. Yeah. But then where I really felt home is probably DC and San Francisco. That I really click with those cities. Not because they're similar to Armenia or anything, just because my personality, I think, goes well with the personalities of those cities.
What keeps you motivated on a tough days? Where do you get the inspiration from?
Most of the time, just from the fact that I know there's so many people that are doing worse off than I do. So I know that my life could have been worse than it is, now or at that particular moment. And then I realized that, my problems are not really that big, and I shouldn't be really focused on the problems, but rather on the solutions, and realized that everything, there was that saying, right, on one philosopher or king's ring that says everything, it read something like, everything shall pass.
Oh, and this too shall pass.
Yeah, and this too shall pass. Yeah,
a pharaoh or something? Was it a pharaoh?
It was on a ring.
I want to say Solomon.
Solomon, yeah.
Maybe.
Oh, okay.
Or I might be wrong. So, yeah.
Hey, the internet.
Yeah, there you go. And while you're searching, I will ask the last questions of this evening because we're almost out of time. we've talked a lot about studying and studying abroad. So, what are the benefits of studying abroad? So, how can we encourage and inspire other people to dare for just to go for it, to try it, and not to be afraid of giving a chance and going somewhere else for a new experience?
I think what I've heard from too many people is that they're afraid to even try.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, don't be afraid. Give it your best. Try. If you don't, get accepted to one program, try again until you do. Because there are so many programs out there for studying abroad that one of them will definitely select you. And especially if you're hardworking, you learn from your mistakes, right? You did something wrong in one application. Or maybe you didn't do anything wrong. It's just you're not the perfect fit for that program. So you learn from your applications, and also you learn what programs to apply to. The benefits of studying abroad are way too many. I think we can devote an entire program and talk about it. But first, learning about other cultures.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, besides the professional skills that you get, it's what you also do outside of class, right? So meeting other people, learning about other cultures, learning how to deal with people from other cultures, because there's so many things that might offend a group of people that aren't present in your country, and you're not even, aware of it, and then you start talking to those people and like, wow, am I, racist? Because you never think about those things. For example, we don't have a large black community in Armenia, right? So, again, going back to stereotypes, I also had stereotypes because I hadn't met many people of color, let's say. And then in the US, you talk to different people and like, wow, I mean...
You become more flexible.
You become more flexible, and you learn about so many things, again, besides your professional skills that will definitely, and they do help in life, be it in career or just learning how to talk to people or...
Thinking out of box.
Thinking out of box, yeah.
Well, Armen Can, thank you. And did you...
No, unfortunately, our time with you is up.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you for coming. It was great to have you. So we need to go to a commercial break, and we will be back with our usual calendar of events.
Stay tuned, guys. We have another few minutes to go, and we will announce what events we have to enjoy for the upcoming week. Thank you, Armen, once again, and hope we'll see you again.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Oh, say, can you see?
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed?
Adamast, what are you doing?
He's trying not to forget where he came from.
Welcome back to this last segment of the Great American Weekend for this weekend, our first weekend back in 2020.
2020, that
2020.
Sounds cool.
Yeah, 20. Can we do 20 squared? No.
Yeah, no.
No, okay. No, we wouldn't do
What
that.
is your New Year's resolution, Master Steve?
I didn't make one, but I can make one up right now for this year to not be worse than last.
That's a great one.
Just to be as general and as ambiguous as possible, or just to live through the year. That could be.
That's too dull.
No. This is how it should be phrased. My resolution is for this to not be my last year.
Oh, okay. If that depends on you.
Anyway, so American Corner Yerevan. A reading club with Natalie Sharp on January 14th at 3:30. This week they will be reading and discussing Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Please be informed that the club is for people with intermediate level of English, and it is 18 plus.
Oh.
The debate club with Margaret Talber. January 16th at 1 p.m. This week's topic for discussion is Charity Begins at Home. Please be informed that this club is also for people with intermediate, and advanced levels of English.
Thank you. And we have only one movie in English at Kino Park this week from 12th to 15th January. Richard Jewell, an American biographical drama film directed and produced by Clint Eastwood. It is at 9:25 p.m. every day from the 12th till 15th.
Okay. Clint Eastwood, he's a living legend.
He's awesome. Yeah. I agree.
So live music. Anushik Alaverdian, Lady Sings the Blues, tomorrow night, January 12th at Uli Hanyan Club. The Vishap Ensemble is at Stop Club tomorrow night, January 12th. There's a live evening with Rasia Avanesian and friends at Kami Music Club tomorrow night as well. That one starts at 9:30. Suzy Sirakanyan and the Union Band at Mezzo tomorrow night as well. Tomorrow's a busy night for music. My goodness. Take your pick. Go out. See some good shows, some good tunes. The Old New Year Party. Kami and Friends project at Kami Club on January 13th. It starts at 9:30. Dialogue project is at Uli Hanyan Club on Monday the 13th as well. Dave Giodakian, our good friend, his quartet is at Uli Hanyan Club on Tuesday the 14th. A tribute to Benny Golson with the Karen Gregorian Quintet at Uli Hanyan Club on Wednesday the 15th. Colors of Music at Kami Club. This is a live session on January 15th at 9:30. Sarkis Dalakian Trio at Uli Hanyan Club on the 16th. Also on the 16th at Mezzo is the Yellowstones Band. That starts at 8:30 on January the 16th. The Ness Band is playing at Mezzo a couple of nights later on January 18th. Shegun Rock Concert at the Venue on January 19th. Funkabout is playing at Uli Hanyan Club on the 19th as well. And Forsh and Re Minor are playing at the Park 2750 in Yerevan, January 11th at 7 p.m.
And we've got some other events. Pop Quiz Volume 7 at the Venue, January 13th at 9 p.m. Metal Music Pop Quiz at the Venue, January 14th at 9 p.m. Old New Year at Claude Monet, January 13th at 8 p.m. And The Nutcracker, a Shadow interactive theater play for kids, January 12th, which is again tomorrow at 4 p.m. And that's all we have prepared for this upcoming week. And I would like to end our show with this quote, if I may, Master Steve.
Please do. I love your quotes.
I would like to end the show with a quote by Martin Luther King Jr. The function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character. That is the goal of true education.
That's a good note to end on.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Again, thank you, Armen Kazarian, for joining us tonight as our guest. Thank you, all of our listeners, for tuning in. But, you know, you got to call in next time.
Yeah.
Please, call in.
Come on, we're
Leave
back.
some comments. We're getting lonely here.
Now you know that we're back, and we'll be on air next Saturday from 7 to 9 p.m. And if you missed the show, you can just go ahead and catch it on our Facebook group and on Radio Von Facebook page and also the website. And do not forget about the application. Download it and listen to Radio Von anywhere around the globe. We'll be back next week with more stuff for you to talk about. With you this evening was Master Steve
and Ina M.K.
Good night.